Good afternoon from South Africa.
Good afternoon, South Africa.
Good afternoon from Belgium as well.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. So I see people are still joining in, but we have a very packed session today. So I think that we should just get started and people, of course, can continue to join in as we go through the session. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Advocacy Tool launch and consultation that will follow the session. We're very excited to share with you some of the recommendations that we've developed with our consultation with the Women's Business Associations and Women's Economic Empowerment experts across the G7 and the European Union. For today's session from 9 to 10, we will have the Advocacy Tool launch. And then right after the Advocacy Tool launch, we'll go right into an informal stakeholder discussion consultation with the International Trade Center and the Swedish Institute for Standards. So everybody is welcome to stay for both sessions, and the consultation will go from 10 to 11:30. So as we're getting started, I'll just share with you briefly about the flow of the Advocacy Tool launch, and then when we get into the consultation, we'll share the agenda for that as well. So we'll start with a few welcoming remarks, and then we'll share briefly the Advocacy Tool overview and methodology. And then we have invited some very special speakers to share with us some highlights from the Advocacy Tool. Afterwards, we'll go into a fireside chat with Antonia Lorenzo Lopez from BioAzul. And then we'll share a bit about the Women's Empowerment Principles and our We Commit campaign and offer some closing remarks. And during the closing remarks, we'll share the link so that everybody has a chance to access the Advocacy Tool. So first off, I'd like to invite Gabriel Gonzalez from the European Union delegation in Ottawa, Canada, to share some welcome remarks from the European Union. Gabriel?
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you for having me today. And I also like to thank UN Women and We Empower for organizing this event. As you know, gender equality is a core principle of the European Union, and it's a priority for European Commission President von der Leyen, who unveiled the latest EU gender equality strategy in early March this year, providing a vision for a fully gender equal Europe. Together with the EU member states and key partners like Canada, the European Union has been working to overcome many barriers that still exist to women entrepreneurship and encourage women to start their own businesses. One of the main Commission initiatives is to support networking among female entrepreneurs, potential female entrepreneurs, and support organizations with several tools and platforms that are available and include the WeGate platform, which is a one-stop shop for women entrepreneurship, but also the European Network for Mentors for Women Entrepreneurs, and the European Community of Women Business Angels and Women Entrepreneurs. This work is important because gender equality is not just the right thing to do, but it's also a smart way to boost economic growth and productivity gains. In the EU alone, studies showed that improvements to gender equality could generate up to 10.5 million additional jobs and increase GDP by up to 10% by 2050. There has been significant progress over the last decade, but even with the right policies in place, inequalities still persist. Women make up 52% of the total European population, but only 34.4% of self-employed and 30% of startup entrepreneurs. The COVID-19 crisis has also exposed cracks in the progress made, making conversations like the one we're having today all the more important. So the European Union is therefore very happy to be partners with UN Women and the ILO in the We Empower project, and I very much look forward to today's conversations.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. We are also very happy to have the support of the European Union for the We Empower program. I'd also like to invite Adriana Sierra Leal from the International Labour Organization, also one of our founding program partners for the We Empower program, to share a few remarks as well. Adriana?
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to We Empowered and UN Women. As the Women's Entrepreneurship Development Program of the ILO, we're excited to be here and share welcome remarks. Earlier this year, we were invited to make inputs on the Advocacy Tool and found that it resonates with much of our work and that we can use it to inform our own advocacy. And this comes as a welcome reaffirmation that gender equality is only achievable if we strive for it together. So I want to share with you 2 brief stories and 3 key lessons on the power of advocacy. So first, in Tanzania, we conducted an assessment of the framework conditions of women's entrepreneurship development and used the findings of this assessment to advocate with national stakeholders for changes in the country's public procurement policies. And as a result of these advocacy efforts, 30% of all public and private bids are now going to women-owned and women-led businesses. Similarly, in Tunisia, we conducted a similar assessment, which was taken up by the Chamber of Commerce of Women in Business. And this Chamber of Commerce used the findings of the report to advocate for themselves and to develop a country roadmap for supporting women entrepreneurs. And today, the government has allocated a specific budget line to put this roadmap into action. So these 2 short stories really show us that first, that advocacy is an incredibly powerful tool that can lead to very tangible and concrete improvements for women entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses. And in the context of regressions and advancements of gender equality that we're seeing, including women's inclusion in the world of work, this becomes increasingly more necessary. Second, as is reflected in the tool, advocating for more gender-responsive measures is the responsibility of all of us, especially those in positions of power and with access to platforms that can influence change. And finally, just as advocating is all of our responsibility, so it is our responsibility to make space for women entrepreneurs to advocate for themselves, to use their own voices to express their demands and their needs, and to also propose solutions that we might not have otherwise have thought of. So congratulations to UN Women for launching this new tool, and we look forward to amplifying the voices of women entrepreneurs in response and recovery together. So thank you for having us, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Indeed, we're very excited about the Advocacy Tool launch, and a big thanks to the International Labour Organization for being one of the program partners for the We Empower program. Next, I'd like to invite Anna Falf, who's a Senior Global Program Manager for the Women's Empowerment, for the We Empower program, and head of the Women's Empowerment Principal Secretariat for UN Women based out of New York, to also share a few remarks. Anna?
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So excited to see so many people joining us today. We had in April a consultation as well, and we worked really, really hard to understand the impact of COVID-19 on women's economic empowerment more broadly. So we've had consultations ongoing, and in April we published a document. I had a little bit of a look back to this document to really understand what was our views in April, in March and April, when this pandemic started. And there were 2 things that we, in this call to action for the private sector, that we kind of picked up and that I'd like to bring back to the discussion today. One is that we already saw that it would go beyond a health crisis to really be a crisis that impact the labor market and the social and the economic status of citizens more broadly. We really called for an immediate, coordinated, people-centered and gender-sensitive response to the crisis. And ever since, and this document is available on our website, wex.org, but ever since we did come up with these recommendations, and I think many of them are very much valid still today, we have been really concerned with both women employees and women entrepreneurs, and tried to really see what is it that we can do, how can we bring this community together. And as you will see throughout the conversation today, that we have positioned women entrepreneurs within a larger ecosystem of entrepreneurship, within the ecosystem of stakeholders that can support her. We talk about the public sector, what the public sector could really bring to the table to support through policies and programs and initiatives. We will also hear from an entrepreneur herself, Antonia, later on how that actually was instrumental to help kick off her company, BioAzul, in 2003. We also talk about the role of the private sector. And this is unprecedented times. And we are really looking within the private sector to see that women entrepreneurs also show solidarity to other women entrepreneurs. That it is the time to really step up and lead a company from a gender equality perspective and become a gender responsive company. We have seen in this, since the COVID-19 started, that a lot of people have taken a people-centered approach, looking at the health of their employees, looking at work-life balance, and equally so, looking to see how women businesses can support each other and show that solidarity in this crisis moment. We see that many women have struggled to keep their businesses alive, and we've seen that they're very concerned with their employees and how to keep their employees while they're struggling also with the unpaid care work agenda, while having to take care of children, homeschooling, etc. And how do you do all this together? And that's how the intention of the advocacy tool is for women entrepreneurs to not be there alone struggling, because it will have an impact on all of us in the economy and the well-being of people at large if women entrepreneurs are not successful throughout this crisis. And we will hear from Barbara, Rebecca, and Amparo on the specific recommendations that they have picked up and that they think that we will be able to support women entrepreneurs in these days. And it very much mirrors the crisis in 2008 with the financial and economic crisis. So there are lots of lessons that we can pick up, but the crisis is also, on the other hand, very unique. And we need to learn new lessons, and we need to dialogue and really understand what it is that women entrepreneurs need. And while we are launching the tool today, we will also update it in December with additional inputs and support, and particularly what we will be discussing in the second part of this meeting, it's about the definition of women-owned business. So we will update it with the definition and also any other particular views that you think that are emerging as we go into the end of the year. As we heard from Adriana, advocacy can be very, very powerful. And I think everyone in this meeting today will, in their own ways, be able to make a contributions to help. Whether it is buying from a women-owned business in your local community, or whether you are part of a company to start buying the products and services, or whether you are from a government or an intergovernmental organization, to really think about policies and programs that you can help putting in place to really support women entrepreneurs. As we heard from Gabriel, it's not only the good thing and the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. So I will leave it at that, and I look forward to the conversation today. And thanks everyone for joining and for putting all our heads together to support women entrepreneurs. Thank you. Over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Anna. And if Nancy can just go to the next slide, please. So just to build on what Anna said, just to give everybody a bit of background on how we got to where we are today. In July, we had two very important events connecting women's business associations across the G7, where we had a very honest and frank conversation about what type of support would be needed to further empower women entrepreneurs to really play that leadership role in the economic response and recovery of COVID-19. We followed up, so we had a virtual cafe, and then we followed that up with an online discussion that was open to the public. And what we found was very interesting. So we have divided our findings into 3 separate categories based on stakeholder groups, so the public sector, private sector, and civil society. And we've highlighted the various ways through recommendations that these different stakeholder groups can support women entrepreneurs. As everybody has really alluded to, that there's a role for everybody in terms of supporting women's economic empowerment and gender equality, and more specifically, women entrepreneurs. So we hope that this tool can be used by everybody. There's something in there for everyone in terms of supporting women entrepreneurs, and we're excited to see how people will be using it, and we encourage you to be very vocal with that. Get on social media. Please disseminate the tool very widely amongst your network so that we can make sure that we're supporting our women entrepreneurs. So what we have next actually is that we have some very special speakers who we've invited to share with us some insights from the tool. And first, I'd like to invite Barbara Orser from the University of Ottawa to share with us some highlights from the civil society portion of the advocacy tool. Barbara, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks.
Perfect.
I've just been able to reconnect.
Thank you.
So I'll begin with comments about the context and the importance of the advocacy tool. It's timely. In a very focused way, it presents actions and policy recommendations to support women-led and women-owned businesses. It's among the first recovery plan to integrate private sector, public sector, and civil society, signaling that we all have a role to play in recovery. It leverages entrepreneurial feminism by women entrepreneurs for women entrepreneurs. And it integrates many economic recovery plans, a tool to bridge policy recommendations with practical insights. For example, in July, the OECD reported on the state of SME policy measures. None took gender into account. So what's the impact? We've heard some numbers. The McKinsey Global Institute estimates that a gender regressive scenario, that is, take no action, will dilute $1 trillion in GDP. Conversely, taking immediate action now, that includes the recommendations in the advocacy tool, will contribute 13 trillion in GDP by 2030. So just as the structural inequalities are being amplified by the pandemic, so too are economic opportunities of recovery, including putting in place the policy and program recommendations. So we know that all elements of the entrepreneurial ecosystem have been impacted by the pandemic. This includes entrepreneurship, education, and training. And I'm saying that not just as a researcher and an educator. Prior to the pandemic, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor asked national experts in 54 economies to assess the environment for entrepreneurship in terms of 12 conditions. That is access to capital, policy, infrastructure, ease of market entry. Entrepreneurship education was ranked the weakest condition. The advocacy tool presents concrete ideas to be integrated into and to improve training. We know that women face barriers in accessing women's enterprise support services. And this is where entrepreneurs are turning to for much needed information and advice. Women are less likely to have a seat and a voice at these tables. And to date, recovery planning for women entrepreneurs has largely been driven by volunteers in the civil society. This is not sustainable. Governments can lead by building capacity. This includes supporting gender-focused recovery plans and measures contained in the report, including supporting women's enterprise support services. We need advisory committees with all member stakeholder groups, including grassroots, feminist, policy, and women's enterprise experts. And the tool also encourages civil society to lead women-led campaigns, to drive change through task forces, webinars, and social media. With respect to information skills and knowledge, the next slide, please, Nancy, 3 points. We need gender-smart entrepreneurship curricula and training. For example, Telfer and Scotiabank research finds that on average, women report less financial knowledge and confidence. Objective tests suggests there may be merit to these perspectives. The tool recommends new pathways to streamline access to capital, education, and community building for startups and scale-ups in the design of debt and equity instruments. This is not wishful thinking. We see good practices, including practices such as Project Advisor Vicki Saunders, CEO. We need new business models that connect and engage women investors and women-ready, women-owned firms. Second point, transitioning to online digital education threatens to reinforce occupational stereotypes inherent in a lot of off-the-shelf digital content. We need more stories of successful entrepreneurs to inspire others. Third point, we know that women are less likely to adopt ICT. Yes, we're very engaged in social media, but less likely to adopt software tools such as customer relationship management tools. This dampens the ability to transition service enterprises to digital enterprises. We need gender-smart digital boot camps. A final point, to accelerate change, we need collectives and consortia. And many of us on the call today will drive those changes. Public, private, and civil society leveraging evidence-based insights, pressuring within and across stakeholder groups to mobilize the thoughtful recommendations advanced in the advocacy tool. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Barbara. We had several members from the civil society organizations across the G7 and EU who also helped to put together these recommendations. So big thanks to civil society globally who has helped to inform our tool. Next, I'd like to invite Rebecca DeSancho Mayoro from the European Commission's Executive Agency for SMEs to share with us a bit of the high-level recommendations from the public sector.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Barbara, for those insightful recommendations. Good afternoon, everyone from Brussels, European time, and good morning on the other side of the world. I would like to start by thanking, of course, UN Women for driving this important exercise. Thank you, a big clap to all of you for launching the advocacy tool that is aimed to support women entrepreneurs during these challenging and disruptive COVID-19 pandemic times. Well, my name, as you said very well, Stephanie, is Rebecca DeSancho Mayoral, and I work for the Executive Agency of the European Commission, EASME, that is responsible for the support to small and medium-sized enterprises. And I'm now particularly working in the European Innovation Council Accelerator Department, supporting innovative startups to scale up. I'm pleased to be part of this kickoff event for several reasons. Being a participant of this G7 group and initiative that has contributed and prepared the launch of the advocacy tool, and also to support UN Women under the We Empower program. And I wouldn't like to forget also to thank the colleagues from the European Commission. And yeah, well, my contribution to the tool came from both sides, the public sector and civil society side as well, as I'm personally involved in supporting women entrepreneurs in my private time, as well as engaging stakeholders with policymakers. In my current job, I have several hats, and I ensure that we create synergies, which I believe they are very important across European Commission programs, where women-led startups and women in tech, in particular where I'm currently now in the European Innovation Council Accelerator, are beneficiaries of our programs. To name a few of them are Horizon Europe and COSME. And my objective with the brief presentation that I will have today is to highlight the public sector recommendations, particularly to focus on the 5 key areas that you will find in the tool to strengthen the support to women entrepreneurs. We can go to the first slide, please. Thank you. So to start, by creating an enabling legal and policy environment is essential. And how are we going to do that? We need data. We have to develop a national policy framework with concrete goals for improving the performance of women entrepreneurs. You can also find in the advocacy tool relevant good practices and examples. I will not name them. You have to go through the tool and find them. And those are the core further new objectives and results in a more effective way to put it on the ground. Also, it's important to have a collaboration from a holistic approach, vertical and horizontal cooperation, as well as collaboration from national governments to local governments to support women entrepreneurs. The second part that is important in the recommendations in the tool and might be redundant, as we've heard also from the civil society, and we will keep hearing, but it's extremely relevant, is the access to information, skills, and knowledge, which is still lacking behind compared to men for women entrepreneurs. And we need to ensure and further the capacity building for women entrepreneurs, including specifically digital literacy and access to technology. We've seen from previous speakers how this is lacking behind, and we need to make sure we are getting there from also the public sector. The third point would be the access to markets. In this area, what is important to highlight from the advocacy tool, and I believe during the last years is becoming more and more relevant in all the studies that you can read about women entrepreneurship, is that you find that public contracts, so what's called procurement contracts, in the majority goes to men entrepreneurs. And it's important to, in this area, the advocacy tool highlight the need for suppliers diversity and inclusion strategy in order for more women entrepreneurs to access markets on equal footing. So that's an important change from the past, in my opinion, as well. The fourth point would be the access to finance, that we hear a lot about this gap in finance gap, gender finance gap. So how does the tool reflect that? It's to increase the access to public funding for women entrepreneurs through actions, as well as financial incentives. That's, I would say it's also particularly important, highlighted in the tool, how supporting new financing pathways that streamline access to investment for women entrepreneurs, to support response and recovery, and to increase the number and sustainability of women-led businesses. On the fifth element that it's relevant in the advocacy tool is the access to networks. And again, it might be something that you think for men is also difficult, but it's particularly difficult for women that have work-life balance difference with men and don't access to the same networks as men do. So the tool highlight that the development of women business networks is crucial. And working with civil society and private sector is essential to strengthen organizations and to support virtual spaces for women, as we've been doing, I think, through the period of the confinement, deconfinement of the COVID times, and to develop their networks to advance and increase their economic opportunities. Having said that, I would like to conclude that as a great advocate for gender equality, I'm very glad to have witnessed during my past years that the increase on the number of women-led companies through all the actions that we've been and to close on a positive note in these difficult pandemic times, more than ever, the importance of women's networks and stakeholders engagement like today, to continuously support women entrepreneurs to pursue their passion and to achieve their dreams. So with that, I pass over to you, Stephanie. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And just to add also, so the way the tool is divided beyond those 3 stakeholder groups is we've identified 5 cross-cutting themes, an enabling environment, including legal and policy considerations. There we also do reference care, issues concerning the crisis of care, access to information, knowledge and skills, access to markets, access to finance, and access to networks. So in all the 3 different stakeholder groups, you will see these 5 cross-cutting themes referenced with specific actions for that particular stakeholder group. Next, I'd like to invite Amparo de San Jose, the director from the IESE Business School's Business Angels, to share with us a bit of high-level recommendations from the private sector. Amparo?
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, good afternoon, dear all, many ladies and a few gentlemen. We need more gentlemen in these conversations. I also join the previous speakers in my gratitude for the privilege of being able to participate in the preparation and the development of the advocacy tool. Very briefly, a few words on myself. I work at the ESE Business School, building and executing support programs for entrepreneurs to start, to grow, and to finance their business. I'm particularly active in the early stage funding for startups, where we also promote gender balance. That is, helping women to take their place at the front. That is, making investment decisions, whether as business angels or venture capital fund managers. We need to build this industry more equalitative. So now going back to the advocacy tool, in particular for the private sector, though you will hear many things that my colleagues mentioned previously, it's clear that the private sector cannot work isolated from the other parts of the society. But indeed, the private sector, you see there you have companies, large companies, small and medium-sized companies, business associations, women business associations, etc. Indeed, they need to take an active role, and they can do so to advance gender equality. Private sector agents, they reach and they engage with women entrepreneurs in many ways. They are already doing so. So going to the first point, how the private sector can contribute, in particular regarding access to information, skills, and knowledge. This is one of the points that all the previous speakers, they pay attention, because access to information and skills and knowledge is the basics of everything. These are already within the private sector. So the private sector can use their expertise, their networks, and the funding they have available to support women entrepreneurship. And only some of the suggestions that the advocacy tool puts together in this field, in these 3 fields, are skilling women in digitalization issues, as Barbara pointed out, not only in basic aspects, but allowing women to be more skilled to develop software, to create innovative ICT products, and to develop and to put into the market very sophisticated solutions in digital terms. Following this, they need to be supported, or they could be supported by the private sector in identifying the opportunities and exploit those opportunities, which needs to be completed with the knowledge and support to build growth and ambition to scale. Women startups, women entrepreneurs, they only need to remain small if that's more efficient for the business. We need to build big, large, relevant and international women-led startups. A second key point to improve women entrepreneurship and to better shape better equip women acting as entrepreneurs or launching their new business is the access to markets. This is key to entrepreneurship, access to markets. And for this, the private sector, besides what has been doing so for male and for the non-gender specific entrepreneurship, they need to be, or they could be innovative in the following ways. Many things have been said about public procurement, but indeed the private sector is a huge purchaser. And they can diversify the product offer, also their supply chains, to incorporate not only more women-led businesses, also their specific products and their specific solutions, and to consider that no innovation is gender neutral. So they also need to take into consideration women in developing their solutions they are putting in the market. As I mentioned, they are big purchasers. They can use the purchase power to the benefit of women entrepreneurs And also they can work in this with civil society. So in a way we can recognize altogether and recognize women produce goods and services and to favor them when they are better than the existing solutions. And a third point, final point, to complete the cycle, the entrepreneurship cycle, is the access to finance. How the private sector, which of course includes the financial sector, equity investors, angels of VC, also the new alternatives forms of funding like crowd equity or crowdfunding or crowd lending, how to facilitate access to finance for women entrepreneurs with the goal to ensure that they get better funding rates, meaning that we get more women entrepreneurs with funding from the private sector, from the public sector. But specifically what the private sector could do is first, nowadays we cannot do anything without looking at data. We need to collect meaningful data and timely data to design more effective funding instruments for women entrepreneurs. We cannot design more instruments based on general assumptions or based on any prejudgment. We can find data, we can design instruments to collect data and to be precise in the development of instruments specific for women entrepreneurs. Also, data is there to help us to monitor and to ensure that the instruments in the market and the financial products in the market are serving to the needs of women entrepreneurs. But we also need to work on the women entrepreneurs themselves to prepare them to become competitive in fundraising. This incorporates many skills, but to do proper fundraising, we women, we need to put businesses as good as the other businesses or the non-gender specific businesses are, and also we need to communicate them effectively to investors and potential funders. And finally, we also need to work for the benefit of women entrepreneurs on the supply side. That is, we need to encourage more women to become angel investors for many reasons. Two of them is that they understand better women-led businesses and women-led products and services, and they have a higher tendency to invest in women angel investors, in women entrepreneurs. But not only for that, but it's also because it's good for women to be more active in the financial sector. So we need to encourage more women to become angel investors and play key roles as investors in venture capital funds and the banking industry. So with this, we complete a more gender early stage funding industry. So you can see that all the elements of the private, the public sector, and the civil society, they need to work align to achieve the goals. And this alignment is maybe or probably one of the biggest challenges as well. So thank you for letting me be part of this in the coffees and the preparation of the advocacy tool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amparo. Indeed, the public sector, private sector, and civil society are all charged with that very important task of collaborating and working together to lift up women entrepreneurs. So hopefully the advocacy tool can help us to find a way to collaborate in the ecosystem and better support women entrepreneurs. So with that said, thank you so much to our past speakers. And I'd now like to invite Antonia Lorenzo Lopez, the CEO and co-founder of BioAzul, for a fireside chat moderated by Anna Fouth, their senior program manager and of the Empower program and head of Women's Empowerment Principal Secretariat. So over to Anna and Antonia.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And before we get started, I would like to thank everyone for sharing resources in the chat box and introducing themselves. This is very helpful. And we'll also to continue to share information with you. So thanks for those introductions and for the links. And also when you look at the advocacy tool, you will see at the end of the document, there's also a lot of resources that we have compiled during the previous consultation process. So there's a lot of action going on, and what we are trying to do here is really to kind of bring everyone together so that we can jointly really work for the women entrepreneurs. And we have one with us today, Antonia. I wonder how we can be on the screen together, but I think I am trying to find you. There you are. Thank you. And Antonia has, I printed it out, a really exciting story, Leaders in Action, that we have on our website, webs.org. And she's one of a few women entrepreneurs that we have on our website that are really telling the story of how they kicked off their business and some of the struggles and what have been the support for them to be successful. And so I really encourage you to learn more about Antonia from her story. And but today we'll focus a little bit about this ecosystem that we have talked about through the other speakers, and really to understand from your perspective, Antonia, what were the policies and programs in Spain in particular that really helped you grow your business?
Yeah.
If you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Okay, yes. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. Very proud to be here today. I think the micro should be muted for Lina. Yeah. So the thing is, I'm very proud to be here today. Hope I can give some insight as well based on my story that could be helpful for everyone. So yes, I am located in Spain, in Malaga, in the south. I think there are two policies that were, or two main points that were for us very instrumental or very helpful. At the beginning of the company was the first one. There was an initiative launched by the Spanish government in order to recover talent from abroad, to recover technologies. And then by that time I was living in Germany, working in a research center. So I applied and I got it. So that was really crucial for the company because I got my salary paid for 3 years. So at the beginning we were only 2, so it was really a push. Well, in general, we are very active as a company in research and innovation projects, especially related to natural resources management, water, especially water. So all these EU framework policies on promoting the sustainable water management, I said the urban water, the urban framework directive, the urban wastewater treatment directive, this circular economy package, the recent Green Deal, all this framework is for us, this policy framework is for us very, very important to allow the company to grow. So in fact, we have been participating in many international projects, more than 40 in the last year. And thanks to this, we have created and enlarged our offer of innovative services and technologies. I would say these two are the main one. There are other policies supporting SMEs I also have applied for, but these main two, I would say.
Great. And that's a great start on your business to have your salary paid. So
yeah, that's great.
I think that's a great recommendation for the public sector, I think. But how are you connecting with this ecosystem that we have been talking about to overcome some of the barriers in your business?
Yeah, okay, so Biaful is working in international level from the very beginning. That was from, I mean, the philosophy, working philosophy from when we started with the company. So we are participating as well in several initiatives at international, national, and local level. So we are very much linked to this initiative, and they are very important because they are supporting us, especially SMEs, small, medium-sized companies, in order to do these advocacy actions in front of key stakeholders. And I can say, for example, the European Commission, because I am heavily involved in a Water Europe platform, leading one working group on water and agri-food. And this Water Europe is making this advocacy to European Union in order to include water as a main, say, topic in the policies, in the research and development programs to be adopted by the Commission. So I am let's say, connecting to the ecosystem to overcome some of the barriers linked to be a small company. So I go together with others, and I think this is key, to go together and make more pressure. Also, I think it was quite relevant in my case with the crisis, the economical crisis 2008, that we started to not to see any more competitors, especially small companies working in the same field as us, but we saw collaborators. So we started to create a kind of network, informal network, with these other companies to have more chances to survive to the crisis. And I think this could be, I mean, it will be, and it is in fact also applicable during this COVID crisis we have now. So we identify market opportunities together, we share them, we approach clients together, so we make these cross-selling activities, and I think they are quite supportive for us. Yeah, I think more.
So what would you recommend to other entrepreneurs how to go about that, to kind of put that network together?
I would recommend it, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
what would be the first steps? Building on what you did, like what do you think others could do to kind of take the similar steps?
Yeah, so I mean, I was identifying in my sector, because we are working with water, some main initiatives that were those having more, let's say, being more representative of the sector, and also looking at small, medium companies as my company, and not only big corporates, companies. So I was making kind of shared of initiatives. I thought, okay, this is better, this is good. And I didn't mind to put some money on being a member, not very high amounts, but something. And I was really committed to be active within the network in order to get something out of it. This would be my recommendation. Select the best one, or the one you feel more comfortable with, or you trust more, you never know. But, and then get committed. Otherwise, if you are there as a passive member, normally nothing happens. So yeah, that is
excellent. I understand that you've also been working on mentorship of other entrepreneurs. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think rural women.
Yeah, no, the thing, I am starting. Yeah, so the thing is that I work for the European Commission also since 2012 in supporting EU projects, consortium, to get this exploitation, roadmaps, and whatever has to do with this marketing of the project results, which normally are pre-competitive. That was mainly for project results, in order to guide them on how to do it. And then since beginning of this year, I'm also working on some mentoring programs from this food accelerator that belongs to another European initiative, which is this CIT food. They have programs for all kinds of startups, and they have specific programs for women entrepreneurs in the agro-food sector. So I am getting involved in these activities as well, mentoring, in order to see if I could support somehow in the journey. So yes.
That's very exciting. So what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs during the COVID-19 and how to really overcome some of the main barriers that they are facing?
Well, in general, I would say, I think to say it like this in English, to be daring, I mean, and ambitious. I have the feeling sometimes that some women are a little bit like, shame, or a little bit so. No, I mean, you have to value your skills and just your business proposal. And in line with some of the previous speaker, I would say you have to be innovative, and you have to show how innovative you are. So I think we as women are used to overcome many challenges in our daily life because of being women, maybe some other than the men. And this give us some experience and some skill. We develop this skill in a way that they are very useful for business development and for professional activities. I would say that we are very responsible, very professional, empathic. We are good at planning, short-term, medium, long-term, and we have to use all these skills we have to learn in our daily life now is changing, you know, but some years ago, I started 17 years ago, and probably many of you started even before. So I think I have used it in my professional career. I have because I am always very proud of being a woman having a company. I have been very lucky. I think I haven't really faced very strong discrimination, cases. But I have always behaved in a very ambitious way. So one thing that was also very good for me is to diversify and not only working in national environments or markets. For me, international markets are less hostile than national ones. So I have been working at the European level and international level from the very beginning, and this has facilitated a lot my professional development, skills, CV, everything. Being a woman also in this market, and especially when you are dealing with, let's say, entities such as the European Commission, which is really committed for gender equality, is even a plus. So you have to value this and then go to this international market. I mean, this is based in my experience. And I also recommend joining forces. We were talking about going in these member associations, international initiative. I think it's very relevant to join forces. I have never been involved myself in any association for women entrepreneurs. I have never used it. I have never got information about it since I started, and I think I would have profit a lot of that, but I've never used it.
Interesting. So I have one final question, and thanks for all these insights and advice. How do you think that other entrepreneurs could be using the advocacy tool? And how do you think that we could use it more effectively among women entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think I will use it myself as well, not only for the rest. I'm not very familiar to it, to be honest, but I was listening a little bit on what you said and reading a little bit. So I think we use the plan use the tool in order to plan our efforts toward gender equality. I mean, in the company internally, we have been working a lot on this from the very beginning. We have this balance between men and women, and there is no salary gap, there is no discrimination at all. But I'm sure this advocacy tool could also be of help for us to go further. And I think, and it was said before, that it will include, or it includes, actions and policy recommendations. And for women, I think this is of very much interest for all of us. I think this access to finance, especially public procurement, is key. And I hope this advocacy tool could guide us, me and other entrepreneurs, on how we can access to finance through public procurement, because I see a lot of room there for growing. Also for the new business model that may be included there, that we can follow, propose our business idea in a new environment, totally different as it was before. Yep, I think this is more or less what I have in mind. I don't know if I was replying to your question.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Antonia. And thanks also for being a signatory of the Women's Empowerment Principles, which we will hear a little bit more about now before we close and we head into the second part of this meeting. So Stephanie, over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Anna and Antonia. Thanks also for sharing a bit about your role as a mentor. It's very important. One of the things that came up in the online discussion is really breaking stereotypes. So it's important for up and coming women entrepreneurs to see successful women entrepreneurs, especially in those industries where that tend to be more dominated by men. So now I'd like to invite Stephanie Foster, who's our coordinator in the US, to share a bit about the Women's Empowerment Principles and our ongoing We Commit campaign. Stephanie?
Sure. Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's nice. I noticed many of you who I already know on the call, and many more of you I don't. So this is a great opportunity, again, to continue to build our network and really think about how to create an environment, an enabling environment for not only women entrepreneurs, but really a commitment to women's access to full economic opportunity. And I think that's really the connection between the advocacy toolkit and what we're talking about and the women's empowerment principles, which is a 10-year effort by UN Women and the UN Global Compact to really get high-level corporate commitments and commitments at levels at entrepreneurs and business associations to these 7 core principles of women's economic empowerment. When the WEPs, as we call them, started, it was really limited to corporate signatories, but we've now expanded and hope that many of you on the call, or all of you on the call, sign on. They are open to being signed on to by businesses of any size, so entrepreneurs, small businesses, business associations, and chambers of commerce. And really, I'll talk a little bit more about why I think they're important, but I think first I want to run through the 7 principles, which are obviously on your screen. And these are really 7 principles that I think dovetail nicely with the advocacy tool. If you sign on to the principles, you're really showing your commitment for high-level leadership, for gender equality, for treating all women and men fairly at work, respecting and supporting human rights and non-discrimination policies at your organization or company, ensuring health, safety, and well-being of your workers, people who are there every day, especially, and I think in this really hard time, this is a very important principle, promoting education, training, and professional development, really looking at how to increase the number of women in the supply chain. I know that we just heard about the importance of that from Antonia, particularly around public procurement and private procurement. I think Principle 5 really speaks to that commitment. Promoting equality through participating with community-led initiatives, and then measuring progress. So those 7 principles are really the core, obviously, of what needs to happen throughout civil society, business, and the public sector to support women in the economy, not just women entrepreneurs, but again, women working at every level in the economy. I think that's the what of the women's empowerment principles. The why is really so much of what we've talked about today on this webinar. The importance of information and networking. Joining the Women's Empowerment Principles community really gives you access to a lot of other companies and organizations that are committed to these principles. We have right now about 3,600 entities that have signed on to the Women's Empowerment Principles from across the globe and in every sector. So really being part of that community and being able to access that network and the information and resources from other members of the WEPS community. Also really signaling your commitment. I think often, and I say this as somebody who's worked in this arena for a long time, women entrepreneurs, women in business, big companies really look at what they do to support gender equality as part of their business model and don't really think about necessarily the importance of showcasing it and really helping others learn from their journey. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the WEPS journey, but I do want to really emphasize that I think it's important that we all look at what we have learned as entrepreneurs, as business association leaders, and really take that information and help others learn from it as well, and then learn from them, which is why, as Anna mentioned and Stephanie mentioned, we have on the WEPS website a lot of case studies and resources that really help facilitate that kind of information sharing and thought leadership. I think that's one of the biggest things that the entities, whether again, corporations, entrepreneurship entities, or organizations get from being part of the WEPS. So I want to focus just briefly on the journey, as we call it, so that you see that how joining the WEPS works, how we think about it. We really are looking at this as part of not just something you do once, which is sign on to the WEPs, but part of a long-term commitment. And so we've developed this, this really graphic of how you can go about joining the WEPs and thinking about being part of this community. The first is obviously considering it. For those of you who are on this call, I hope you are considering it. Many of you on the call, I think, have already signed the WEPs, which is the second step. Once you've done that, we do provide, as I said, a lot of tools and resources. We have a gender gap analysis tool to really help you see where your company is, how you can think about moving forward, setting targets, and really working to develop a plan that works for you. Fourth, we think about this as really how you engage your business partners, your vendors, your suppliers, and your employees really to be part of this process so that everyone's working together to really ensure that we're supporting women in business at every level. Obviously, fifth is sustaining the process of being part of the WEPs community, being part of webinars like this, being part of other forums where you can talk about your experiences and lessons and really showcase your thought leadership and your practical leadership on all of these issues. And then lastly, reporting. We all know the phrase, what gets measured gets done. And we know that it's really important as we are going through this process, through the WEPs journey or any other process where we're really trying to make change, that we report on it and that we pay attention to what we've been able to accomplish through metrics and through both qualitative and quantitative information. So I know that some of you, and I saw in the chat from Vital Voices from Zoe and also others, that some of you are nonprofits, and we have a way for nonprofits to be engaged as well, to be allies for the WEPs. And so maybe we should go to my last slide, which is part of the We Commit campaign. And we can get more information to all of you about this, but in order to really amplify both the work being done by businesses, by business associations, entrepreneurs, we have hashtag We Commit, which is a campaign where you can really show your support either by talking about why you signed the WEPs, what you've done to support the WEPs. For allied groups, nonprofits that aren't in the category that can sign, we also invite you to be part of the We Commit campaign to really talk about the work that you're doing around women in the economy, with women entrepreneurs, with others, to really support this work. And so we obviously will be getting you more information about the WEPs and the We Commit campaign through information in the chat box and information that is available on the WEPs website, weps.org. And also we have, as you see, a Twitter account that gives also access to further information. So we really want to thank all of you who've joined the WEPs as signatories, and look forward to welcoming the rest of you into our community. So thanks so much, and back over to Stephanie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I just quickly, again, pass back over to Anna to share with everyone what we've all been waiting for, the launch of the advocacy tool, and the closing remarks before we go straight into the consultation.
Thank you, Stephanie and Stephanie. I will be very brief because I know we're a little bit over time, but I really encourage all of you to download the advocacy tool on empowerwomen.org, and I think we have a banner up, so it should be easy to find. So I welcome all of you. For those that are maybe multitasking, we're also going to send an email later today with the tool and with other resources that have been shared today, including the stories. I also put the link in the chat box, but the Leaders in Action, the series of women entrepreneurs, and what they have accomplished and some of the challenges. Since they're quite recent stories, they also touch upon the COVID challenges. So I saw somebody made a comment about that. I'd like to thank everyone that have participated today, but also that participated in our in our cafe in, when was that, in July? Time passes very quickly when you're working from home. But thank everyone that has been part of the entire process, and particularly the European Union for their excellent partnership and for supporting us along the way, and to ILO for being a partner with us in the We Empower G7 program. We have also been working with the W20 delegates to really align this advocacy tool with what they have as an outcome document from the W20 and the communique and the annex to the communique that focus specifically on women entrepreneurs. So thanks also, I know that you're on the call, so thank you very much for that support and for bringing this advocacy tool also into the W20 discussions. I saw there were a few comments about translation to French. And that is something that we will be working on going forward. We wanted the English version launched, and now we have translators waiting to also translate it into French. So stay patient, and we will send a notification once the French version is out. And finally, there was some comments about lifelong learning, and I just wanted to give a heads up to the 18th of September. We'll have our first learning webinar. We'll focus on confidence as the basis for everything else that we do. And that will kick off a series of webinars and learning boosters that we are preparing for the next 3 months. We'll also have a session on the women's empowerment principles on the 16th of September for those that are interested in that, to learn more about WEPs and what companies have done specifically to build women networks. And on the 22nd of September, we are also focusing on women entrepreneurs, but in the context of the UN Global Compact's large conference on the 21st to 23rd of September. So we'll be sending out more information about this, but stay tuned. And finally, I'd like to thank the ITC and the Swedish Institute for Standards for collaborating with us on the second part of this event. And of course, to Stephanie and Nancy and others in the We Empower team for having carried the work from the virtual cafe till today to really work hard in the consultations with all of you, but also to launch the tool today. A lot of work has gone into it, and we hope to hear more from you. We will, in the website where we have the tool, there's an opportunity to also give your inputs. If you think that something is missing or you would like to add your voice, that's the place. We'll share it later in the afternoon. So I'll hand it over to Jade, who will kick us off for the second part of this meeting. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much, Anna. So let me go straight into it. I see we're a little bit behind schedule. Thank you to everyone for joining. My name is Jade Cochran. I'm the program manager of a flagship program to support women entrepreneurs at UN Women. It's really great to see so many of you here today, which shows you match our interest in this topic and the need for definitions that better represent women's businesses. So we're delighted to have you here today to gain your views. I'm going to moderate today's 90-minute session, which is set up to share and gain a lot of information and perspective from you on what a universal definition on women-owned businesses could look like. So let me just quickly give you an overview of this webinar. So today we're going to start with colleagues from the ITC and UN Women to give an overview of the need for a universal, all-encompassing definition of women-owned businesses and what are the challenges that we have today. The Swedish Institute of Standards will give you an overview of the process of setting up these international standards using this international workshop agreement format, IWA. And that's when we'll get to the heart of the conversation, which is when we want to hear from you on women-owned businesses. What is it to you? What is it in your context, your country, your company, in terms of ownership, management, and control? what economic, social and cultural issues should a universal definition take into account? And then we'll conclude with the next steps and let you know how you can continue to be a part of this. So we have 90 minutes. Please feel free to use the chat function. You can do that to speakers only or to everyone. And just to highlight to you all, this session is being recorded, and that's to help us make sure that our notes match what you are going to be sharing with us. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Simi Kayoum. She's Chief AI of the Economic Empowerment section at UN Women and Policy Advisor on Sustainable Development at UN Women. So I'm passing it over to Simi for welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jade, and I apologize to everyone for the lack of video, but I have been having some problems with the connection this morning here in New York. I hope that everyone can hear me.
Yes, we hear you well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Anna Falth, to Jade, to everyone who has participated in organizing today's sessions. On behalf of UN Women, I'm very pleased to open this portion of today's webinar. I would like to extend a warm welcome to what I see are a large and important number of participants: entrepreneurs, women's business associations, WEP signatories, and others in the private sector, policymakers, academia, and UN partners. As you know, UN Women is the UN organization dedicated to gender equality and the empowerment of women that works to develop and uphold standards and create an environment in which every woman and girl can exercise her rights and live up to her full potential. UN Women helps to connect more women to economic opportunities and assets, including through stimulating equal opportunities for women entrepreneurs. But who are these women entrepreneurs? As we have already heard today, we need to be able to identify women entrepreneurs, to support them, to work with them, to gather the data that can support gender responsive policies and programs on entrepreneurship, particularly in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, but in all contexts. So today's consultation is significant as there are notable differences in the definitions used to describe businesses owned or led by women, including the percentage of ownership, management, and control that women are expected to have. Some countries and private sector entities use the 51% ownership, management, or control threshold that emanated from practices primarily in the United States and then percolated elsewhere. However, due to many reasons which Vanessa Erigbogbo from ITC and my UN Women colleague Anna will outline, this threshold is not always applicable, not always relevant, and often limiting. In fact, several countries and organizations have developed their own definitions. At the same time, we know that the 51% definition works well for many businesses, as previous consultations have shown. For these reasons, UN Women is very pleased to join ITC and the Swedish Institute for Standards to build consensus on the definition and what it should encompass. We hope this will help countries better measure women's contributions to economies and to help women entrepreneurs gain better access to opportunities and contracts, particularly given the disproportionate negative impacts women's businesses are facing during the COVID-19 pandemic and recovery process. We are delighted to continue collaboration with the ITC and to initiate this partnership with the Swedish Institute for Standards. The collaboration covers a number of mutual interests. To see a definition of women-owned businesses that matches the breadth of the experiences of women entrepreneurs and women's businesses across the globe, to bring in the voices, perspectives, and challenges from women to these processes, and to advocate for a stronger definition to be adopted to increase the support and opportunities provided to women entrepreneurs and women's businesses. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Nama Women Advancement Establishment of the UAE, the partner that generously supports our flagship program for women entrepreneurs. And I'd like to close by wishing all participants a fruitful discussion, and thank you all once again for contributing your very important perspectives to this collective endeavor.
Thank you very much, Simi, for giving us the context for where we are today. And Anna, I understand you're going to give us a very short 1-minute remark before we hand over to Vanessa and to Anna. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jade. I don't want to take too much time since we already had conversation in the previous meeting. But just to kind of position a little bit the We Empower G7 project in this context, where we have both the Women's Empowerment Principles and Principle 5 that focus specifically on purchasing from women entrepreneurs. Informally, we can all, we know who is the owner and we know who we can go to support women entrepreneurs. But once we want to scale this, that's where the challenge starts. How do we then define who is the women-owned 51%, 49%? We know that many women are sharing the ownership of the company with their husband or their partner, and are 50-50. So it's very important, and as I mentioned earlier, that we'd like to update our advocacy tool with a definition once this process has been over. So we thank very much the Swedish Institute for Standards and ITC for leading this process, and we look forward to updating the tool once we have a clear definition. It would really help us with all intentions that we have to support women entrepreneurs, to understand who we are talking about, as Simi was saying. It would help those that have commitment, and there are large companies and governments that are committed to buying from women entrepreneurs, but how do we define them? How do we make it a fair assessment of who they should buy from? The same thing, I came across a woman entrepreneur and she said, but this is troublesome for me because I'd like to grow my business. And unfortunately, very few of the investors are women. So I have to go to investor men, and that would distort the ownership of my company. And I have a trade-off to do between growing my business or remain a women-owned company. So this is something that we're really looking forward to, and it will strengthen our tool. And I'm very excited to have all these colleagues and friends here to really help us to formulate this definition so that we can move forward with really supporting and collecting the data that can inform decisions. Great. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it over back to you, Jade.
Thank you very much, Anna. And actually now I'm just going to go straight over to Vanessa Irapopo and Anna Golub to discuss where we are today and the current challenges. So Vanessa is the Chief of Sustainable and Inclusive Value Chain Section at the International Trade Center, and she will be followed afterwards by Anna Golub, Policy Analyst at UN Women, also working on the program for stimulating equal opportunities for women entrepreneurs. So over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Jade. You can see I've been having some issues with my camera. I hope you can all see me well. I thought it's better to have bad camera than no camera at all. So here we are. Thank you, Simin and Anna as well for laying out setting the stage so well. I think there's not very much more for me to do. You've really articulated the issues very, very well for us this afternoon. I want to start by congratulating UN Women for the launch of this advocacy tool. Great work on this really ambitious initiative, and we're really looking forward to looking at it some more and to using it ourselves. I also want to thank you for the opportunity to join this discussion and discuss this other important issue, which is the issue of the definition of women-owned businesses. We're proud, as always, to call you partners, and really proud to be associated with UN Women. So what are we doing here in the next couple of hours? Well, today we are going to have a discussion that's part of a series of informal consultations on the definition of a woman-owned business. We are in the process of developing an international workshop agreement on this definition, jointly with the Swedish Institute for Standards and ISO, the International Standards Organization. So I will start by giving a bit of context, and then and then Anna, I think, will come in and share some experience as well from UN Women, and then we'll hand over to Maria to talk about what the IWA is. So far, we've had 4 global consultations and a couple of capacity building workshops, some organized with Global Compact and Financial Alliance, ISO network of standards bodies, and then today with UN Women, just to give you a sense of where we are. I'm just distracted. If you wouldn't mind muting the microphones. We have consulted 100 stakeholders across 40 countries, so this is we've had really good geographic diversity. All regions have been represented, and a very diverse group of stakeholders as well. We've had private sector, ministries, trade support institutions, women's associations, and so on. So the next steps are that we have, I think, about 10 more days for consultations. Then we will draft a proposal, and that will be shared with our participants, the official first IWA workshop on the 14th of October. So really keen on a very active engagement from all of you in the next part of the session, because all your comments and your feedback will go into how the definition is designed. Who we are, the International Trade Center is a joint organization of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, focused on the internationalization of SMEs. Women's empowerment and participation in trade is a core pillar of our work, and we work on this through our She Trades initiative, whose goal is to connect 3 million women to market by 2021, supported around 7 levers of action, and a web and mobile application where women entrepreneurs can make networks, learn, and meet with buyers and sellers. Next slide, please. And these slides will be shared, so I'm not going to go really into them. So you can see a little bit about the type of work that we do, which is capacity building and you know, business connections, as well as in stakeholder engagement, especially in the trade community, around making trade more gender inclusive. Next slide, please. So I'll go right into the issue of women-owned businesses. What's the current landscape? Many different definitions. Sometimes we find that even in the same country, multiple definitions, various different terminologies, and in some cases, indeed, no definition. We wanted to give you a sense of some of the types of definitions that we've come across, and actually through the course of these stakeholder consultations, we have identified even more different types of definitions. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we see, WeBank in the US, you know, which was one of the very early entities putting the definition out there, has you know, defined women-owned businesses as 51% or more owned, controlled, and managed by women, or 51% of the equity in a public business is owned by one or more women. And it includes an element of managerial function. IFC has a bit of this definition, the 51% definition, but they also have a 20% or more definition, which focuses on 20% ownership, one or more women in senior management, as well as more than 30% of the board of directors being women, where a board exists. Other definitions include, from Chile, more than 50% of the company's property is owned by one or more women, or a company's legal representative or general manager is a woman. we came across one from the Nigeria Network of Women Exporters of Services, where they look at share capital, which is the woman's share capital has to be the highest, or assets of the company, and that needs to be more than 35%. And the woman has to be a CEO or major director, as well as be a signatory to the accounts of the company. So you can see that this one is quite a comprehensive way of looking at women-owned businesses. And we give a couple of more examples on the slides. Then when I spoke about there being multiple terms referring to women-owned businesses, you know, we often talk about women entrepreneurs, or female starters, female founders, women-led, women SMEs, women business enterprises. There are a number of different terms, and what's even more confusing is when they're used interchangeably. Then looking at what the current limitations are of the definitions, as hinted, I think, by both Anna and Simin at the start, first of all, it can impede growth by limiting the amount of investment by non-female owners into the company. So that dilutes the ownership to less than 51%, and despite women needing more capital, they're limited in where they can seek the investment from. It also creates context-specific issues. We've seen in some contexts where there are cultural issues or tax issues, cost-sharing issues, and I'm sure more of that will come up in the discussions. But you know, issues around family ownership of businesses that aren't really quite adequately captured in the 51% definition. Also, in terms of the number of women-owned firms, we find that at the global level, it's quite hard actually to find a sufficient pool, despite there being so many women engaged in business and taking a controlling role in businesses. It can be quite difficult to find that number of firms that are 51% owned by women, especially when we start looking at the larger companies where the shareholding is more diversified. And finally, it creates ownership requirements that cannot necessarily be easily adopted more widely and in as many countries as we need it to be adopted. So this is the backdrop, and I think really presents a very strong case in a nutshell for creating this common definition. First of all, in terms of access to finance, broadening the avenues through which women can access finance. Likewise, on access to markets, really enabling organizations and companies who are looking for more women to work with, enabling them to identify them more easily and allowing for there to be more women available to do business with. And similarly on capacity building, you know, the ability to better target where the women entrepreneurs are. One key issue that we find is on data. So we hear a lot when we speak to policymakers that there's this lack of sufficient data, and we believe that by having a common definition, it will allow us to more easily capture gender data, more easily identify women entrepreneurial gaps, and more easily compare the situation across different contexts in different countries, as well as, of course, facilitating knowledge sharing. There are political and technical sensitivities. A firm belief that 51% is the gold standard, and in some countries a firm belief, or in some stakeholder groups, a firm belief in their own standard. Potential risk to existing corporate and certification infrastructure is quite, especially the US multinationals have developed a very strong infrastructure around certification and way of doing this. And then balancing our short-term tactical goals of getting more women in the pipeline and visible with our long-term strategic goals of having more women really in control and in influential and powerful positions in business. And then finally, also working with national statistical organizations to get them to see the value of having this internationally comparable gender data. Whilst they may value it at the national level, they may not see the value across borders. So what are the key milestones? Today we're going to, in breakout groups, have discussions around these guiding questions. As I mentioned, the inputs will go into a draft proposal. First workshop will be from the 14th, 15th and 16th of October, 3 days. And we will provide stakeholders of the formal workshops with access to a Moodle site where we'll put documents, videos, and provide a platform for discussion and submission of feedback. So with that, I'm going to actually hand over to Anna to make some comments, and then over straight to Maria.
Anna, just to let you know to unmute if you're speaking.
Hello, sorry about that. Can everyone hear me now? Great.
Very well.
Thank you so much. This has been a really great experience listening to this. Thank you to the We Empower team for the Advocacy Tool, and thank you to ITC and SIS for leading this process. I am really excited to talk about it because we've been doing some work trying to disentangle what it means, what the use of the term entrepreneur and the use of the term women-owned business, because sometimes they're conflated. A lot of you are, I wasted some time with my mute, and what I wanted to say is, if those of you are on camera, I noticed that in the chat box that a lot of you are entrepreneurs. So I wanted to see, you can use the little reactions button on the bottom of your panel. I wanted to see how many of you think that your experience is exactly the same as all of the other entrepreneurs on this call. Yeah, that's what I thought. We'll see. So what I wanted to share with you is a model of defining an entrepreneur that we can use to sort of, that I want to propose to be able to map out that entrepreneurship and women's businesses occur along a spectrum. So one also definition of entrepreneurship that I really like is from Max Weber from 1947, is that entrepreneurs attempt to predict and act upon change within markets, and the entrepreneur bears the uncertainty of market dynamics. So under this kind of under this definition, you also recognize that entrepreneurship and women's business is a risk. And it has to be a hand-in-hand mutual responsibility to support entrepreneurship so that women don't bear all of that risk and it's not their burden alone. And this is important because the lack of clarity around what it means to be entrepreneur means that different types of enterprises and activities are lumped together in a single category, even though there's a lot of variations in the motivations to become an entrepreneur and the context that you're in. So just to kind of go through this map, if everyone can see it, like if you're an entrepreneur, imagine you have a little red sticky dot, or if you're a company that sources from women's businesses, imagine you have a little red sticky dot. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, we can see it, but would you mind making your slide full screen? Some people are asking to be made bigger.
Oh, apologies. Okay, let me do that.
Thank you.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, like technical difficulties. Okay, so imagine you have a sticky dot of the kind of entrepreneur you are, or the kind of entrepreneur you work with, or the kind of entrepreneur you source from. It occurs along a spectrum, so you may or may not be in a less developed or a more developed context. But a really important part of this that I think was mentioned earlier is that there's kinds of entrepreneurships based on a spectrum of necessity to opportunity. So the kinds of entrepreneurs and businesses that we're talking about that are going to do things like access procurement contracts and do startups and earn, go to high barrier to entry industries, those are likely to be opportunity entrepreneurs. So you can see in the upper quadrant would be opportunity entrepreneurs, and depending on your context, whether you're in a more developed or less developed country, you can see where you would be. Now, just to explain this concentric circles, you see at the very, very center that what is modeled as a women-owned business is by the 51% owned and certified definition is quite narrow compared to all the types of entrepreneurs and women's enterprises that could exist. So just to contrast, at the very far end, in the yellow circle, you see that this is all self-employment. Sometimes actually an even broader circle would be own account workers, but we're all self-employed as entrepreneurs, whether we are doing it formally or informally. And then as self-employment, as you get more formal, the circle becomes narrower and there's less of them. Now, to explain this funky ring of Saturn, I want to sort of bring back the fact that there is a difference between a women-owned business and an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur is not necessarily an established business. An entrepreneur, it could be a startup, it could be somebody who has a mindset, and not all women-owned businesses really have an entrepreneurship sort of mindset or intention. They may have inherited the business and they don't want to grow it, or there's all sorts of different reasons why that might be the case. So the reason I'm showing you this is to help situate that entrepreneurship and women's own businesses, they exist on a spectrum, a very context-dependent spectrum, and it's not black and white what a woman-owned business is, because the experiences are very heterogeneous. So I just want to talk really quickly about how that impacts. A lot of you were mentioning procurement and gender responsive procurement, and that's great because that's part of the absolute strategy for our flagship program. One thing that we come up with to problematize just a narrow definition of women-owned businesses, just keeping it to the circle in the middle, is that it's exclusionary, that you might miss out a lot of different types of businesses. Not only that, but if we're talking about the types of businesses that can get procurement, then we're probably not talking about the businesses in the other circles that may not have the capacity. So what we have to reconcile is that we're talking about women-owned businesses, but they're a heterogeneous group and they have different needs. And so as you get more informal, the needs are going to be different than as you have a high growth opportunity-based entrepreneur in a developed context. So we just want to sort of bring that home and imagine yourself and your experience. And as we go into the breakout sessions and discuss the definitions, I hope that this will help provide a little bit of context about the way that entrepreneurship is very diverse and women-owned businesses are hard to define.
Great, thank you, Anna, for showing us exactly the breadth of experiences that women entrepreneurs and women businesses have, and thank you, Vanessa, for showing us all of the different challenges to where we are now and the variety of definitions. So I'll now pass it back over to Maria, who's going to give us a short overview of the IWA process. Maria Gustafsson is project manager at the Department of Standardization at the Swedish Institute of Standards, and she is the standardization project manager for this work that we're doing now, the ISO/IWA 34 on definition of a women-owned business and guidance on its use. So over to you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Jade, and thank you everyone else, all the previous speakers, and also thank you very much to UN Women for inviting us to share this day when you share your success stories. So we're very, very happy about that. I will put my slides up. There we go, that panel. Yes, so as said, my name is Maria Gustafsson. I work for the Swedish Institute of Standards, and I would talk a bit about the formalities of the process and also a little bit about the procedures that we will follow in this case. And I realize that quite a few of you may be completely new to ISO and this formal sort of standardization. So just to mention quickly that ISO has 164 members, and you're only allowed to have one member per country, so that means that most of the world is covered in this type of standardization. The head office is located in Geneva, and they cover a wide variety of topics. It started out with the industrialization, where you needed to make sure that nuts and bolts fit together, but over the years it has moved on to lots of different issues, such as environmental management systems and corporate social responsibility, to name a few. And I won't go through all the numbers, but I'm always very impressed myself with the fact that there are actually more than 100,000 experts working on developing different ISO standards around the world. Since this is an organization where, or a forum where organizations meet to agree on terms, there are some rules from the WTO that apply for how the work is conducted. My employer, the Swedish Institute for Standards, is the Swedish member of ISO and also of the European Standardization organization called CEN. We have a mandate from the Swedish government to do so, but they're not a government agency. We're actually a stakeholder-driven independent non-profit organization, which basically means that we are owned by our members. And again, for those of you new to standards, just a couple of examples in these pictures where you have international standards at work and one where you don't. One very current topic are the surgical face masks. Now with COVID-19, you need to make sure that they are safe, and then you have international standard setting test methods for that. And a lot of these standards have actually been made freely available now to help during this pandemic. Another case where you have international standards is every time you pay with your credit card, there are standards making sure both that the transaction works and that it's safe. So there you also have international standards working to make things easier. But when it comes to the power plugs, we all know when we travel, we need to bring our adapter with you. And that is because you don't have international standards and you're not likely to ever have them, because it would mean that you would need to do large infrastructural changes to get that. And the process to develop an international workshop agreement or a standard is called standardization. We work with 4 core principles. The most important one is consensus, which means that it's not unanimity, but we need to make sure that we try to resolve all conflicts or disagreements as good as possible. It's also the principle of transparency, and all standardization work is stakeholder driven. CIS and ISO don't have our own ideas about what the content of the standards should be. That's up to the experts developing them. And ISO standards are always voluntary to use. They may be referenced in government policy or legislation, which makes them binding, but in themselves they are voluntary. And the whole purpose is to support businesses and other organizations around the world by setting best practice so that we can help facilitate global trade and also to support societal needs. And this EVA process or IVA process is the fastest way to get the document through ISO. And it only has 5 steps. The first 2 of them are about getting the approval to get started. And then currently we're sort of in between step 3 and 4. In step 3, we circulate the invitation, which we did in July for the first time. And then in step 4, the document is developed together with the experts. This whole process should not take longer than 12 months, and it's recommended that you aim for less. And I would say that an international workshop agreement is especially suitable in a case like this, where you have a lot of stakeholders that are new to standardization, because it is not as a big commitment as signing on for an entire standardization process. Because I'm sure that some of you are familiar with standards, so just a little bit of a comparison for those of you. The development time is a key difference. For the IVA, as I said, less than a year, but for a standard on a new topic, it can take 3 to 4 years to get the document written. In both cases, you have a consensus process, and the chair or working group convener decide when you have reached that consensus. But with an international workshop agreement, that is where the process stops and you publish a document. If you write a standard, you have ballots, including a public inquiry to further broaden the outreach. And another key difference is that when you develop an international workshop agreement, individual organizations may participate directly. So we have a tool where everyone can sign on as long as you represent an organization. When you develop a standard, you would need to go through the national standards body that is ISO member in your country. So that is also a bit larger step to take. Because of this, especially if you're a standardizer, an international workshop agreement might have a little bit lower status because of the shorter process, but in the end, the market uptake always depends on the content. And if the market wants it, likes it, and needs it, then it does not matter what type of deliverable it is in the end. And standards can, of course, also help to achieve the SDGs in different ways. And ISO has, in fact, performed a mapping on the different standards and standardization projects that contribute toward each goal. And when it comes to goal number 5 on gender equality, 92 standards have actually been recognized. But those are mainly in a few categories, a lot of like on clean water and sanitation, and also personal protective equipment that are suited for both male and female bodies. And also, of course, a lot of overarching sustainability standards where you have non-discrimination as one part of the standard. But this international workshop agreement is the first ISO deliverable that takes a focused view on women's economic empowerment. So I'm extremely happy to be a part of this and do this with our partners at ITC. And it's a very current topic within ISO. They have a gender action plan and talk a lot about gender and standardization. And there's a link in this presentation for a short film on that if you're interested afterwards. And Jade mentioned the title of the International Workshop Agreement. And yes, this is the first deliverable on this topic within ISO. It has gained a lot of interest within the ISO community, and we have a lot of support from the Central Secretariat. Among other things, they have a group called ISO DevCo, where they provide capacity building for the members in developing countries, and they have this International Workshop Agreement as one focus area for their capacity building this year. And also when the proposal is up for ballot, it needs to be approved by ISO's Technical Management Board to get the go-ahead. And this proposal was unanimously approved, which is not that common. So there's a lot of interest from ISO side for this as well. And I hope that by now many of you are wondering, how can I contribute? How can I participate? There's a link how you register for the workshops. I will put that in the chat box as well, so it's easily available. So the first step is to register, and once you're registered, it's key to be active and sending comments, participate in the workshop, participate in web meetings. Because when you develop an ISO deliverable, broad participation is very important so that we get all the different perspectives on the table and can take them into consideration to have a good end result. And it's free of charge to join, but of course you need to dedicate some time to the work in order to have an impact on it. And also, if you know anyone else who should be interested in this, either you can please just spread the word yourself, or if you want us to take contact, just let us know, give us contact details, so we will do that, of course. Because, as I said, the broad participation is very important, both for the process itself, but of course also for the uptake of the result. And Vanessa already touched on the time schedule for the process. Right now, there is an opportunity to provide initial input for those who are registered on the Moodle site, Vanessa mentioned. There has also been an initial analysis performed that is available. And we are holding these type of preparatory web meetings also to collect input. All of that input will be collected into a first draft document and other material for the first workshop. And if you want to take part in the first workshop, you need to register by September 30th. And the first workshop will take place October 14th to 16th, and the second one, December 14th to 16th. And given the COVID-19, the entire process will be digital. Between the 2 workshops, there will be a lot of other activities. There will be commenting via correspondence, and there will also be shorter web meetings on different topics. And the goal is that the final document will be published in February or March next year. So we very much hope that you will join us. As I said, I will put the registration link in the chat, and when you register there, you register for the entire process. So even if you can't be there on October 14th to 16th, please register, and then you will get access to providing comments continuously. So that was a little bit about the process. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great, thank you so very much, Maria.